Like and subscribe now, or you're gonna have bad luck this week.
Nature has a destructive power to trample, crack, and encase the strongest man-made structures. It also has a calm, peaceful power that allows it to grow unnoticed around humans. When buildings, towns, and cities are left behind, nature invades and fills in the void. As a result, plenty of deserted places are taken over by sand, green vines, and even molten lava. Let's have a look at 10 of the most amazing places reclaimed by Mother Nature. Number 10. Mys Aniva Lighthouse, Russia. On the Russian island of Sakhalin lies Aniva town, just a few paces away from neighboring Japan. This position is made the island a hotly contested asset between Japan and the Soviet Union for nearly 100 years. We know how the Soviets are. Over the years, the ownership kept changing between the two powers and was once owned jointly. But post-World War II, the Soviets succeeded in taking over fully. By that time, though, the Japanese had already set up the now famous Mys Aniva Lighthouse on the rocky coastline in 1939. So naturally, the lighthouse too became the Soviet Union's property. This led to about 500,000 Japanese being moved over to the neighboring island of Hokkaido. According to sources, the Soviet Union installed a nuclear generator in the lighthouse to automate its operations, but little is known about this. In 1993, the structure for some reason was completely abandoned and remains so this day. And as it is with such features, it's a popular go-to site among tourists. Some have even reportedly found a few items that belonged to the people who once ran the lighthouse. Number 9. Pripyat, Ukraine. We are all aware of the Chernobyl disaster, and it remains among the most devastating nuclear accidents to ever happen. It has been rated at 7, which is the maximum severity of a nuclear energy disaster. It shares this rating only with the 2011 Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster that occurred in Japan. At such a rating, the energy released was equivalent to roughly 10 nuclear bombs dropped in Hiroshima. Close to the Chernobyl plant was the city of Pripyat. At least 350,000 residents had to be evacuated in less than 4 hours to minimize the further contact with radiation. So people had to move with just a little of their belongings. Today, the city is in disarray, with dishes rotting away in sinks and dolls strewn over kindergarten floors. Pretty much everything remains untouched today since the radiation levels are still way too high for human settlement. So the city is a ghost town where everything has to be left to the forces of nature. Unlike other abandoned places in this video, visiting Pripyat isn't one of the best ideas. Number 8. Balestrino, Italy. Despite its stunningly beautiful structures that are still standing, it would take a lot of cash to rebuild this famous Italian medieval abandoned city in Italy, known as Krakow. It dates back to well over the year 1060. Throughout its 1,000-year history, Krakow saw many conflicts between monarchs, armies, and political ideologies. In 1963, the last 1,800 residents were forced to leave Krakow for their own safety and were relocated to a new town with the same name. Despite being abandoned, Krakow remains one of Italy's most popular tourist destinations. Films such as Quantum of Solace and The Passion of the Christ have used the Italian ghost town to provide a spectacular and authentic setting to their stories. Number 7. Gogi Island, China. Located in the Zhoushan archipelago in the Shengjing province of China, the Gogi Island is one of the most well-known tourist islands in the region, notably because the fishing spree and the village scenery that greets you from every nook and corner of this island. But while you might think that most of the houses wrapped almost entirely with green climbers were a deliberate beauty, they were not. About a century ago, those houses belonged to several fishermen who, along with their families, lived off the waters on the island. With a decreasing population, however, the small bay could no longer support the fishing boats, so the businesses started to dwindle, with only a handful of fish catchers per boat. Everyone left, letting natural surroundings swallow the settlement entirely, leaving the buildings to surrender themselves to nature. Ivy and moss wrapped themselves around every surface, leaving the town rich in greenery. Number 6. The Tunnel of Love, Ukraine. Not every place overrun by nature has to come out creepy, and the Tunnel of Love, located just outside the town of Klevan in Ukraine, is definite proof. With a 3-kilometer mirror-like stretch surrounded by dome-shaped green patches, it presents you with a dreamy and romantic setting that would make a perfect spot for lovers who care for proposals or daytime honeymoons. But it wasn't always like that. Back in the Cold War days, the rail track history was darker as it was deliberately built in the forest with trees planted very close to hide weapons and ammunition from a nearby military base. Once the war ended and the headquarters evacuated, people stopped pruning the trees, leaving the rail abandoned for it to be reclaimed by Mother Nature, who ensured that the branches became well weaved together to make a living cave out of it. Though the incredible beauty we now see today resulted from the old train that occasionally runs to a local factory located at the far end of the track. Number 5. Kolmanskop, Namibia. At one time, this place in the middle of the Namibian desert in Africa was a mining town known worldwide for contributing to about 11.7% of the global diamond production and home to thousands of people. So you can imagine how buzzing it would be in its heyday, when the diamond operation was still very much in play. But it all began in 1908 after a young driver named Zacharias Luala stumbled across a diamond while attempting to move his boss's car, which got trapped in the desert sand. Word soon spread, and hordes of prospectors came to inhabit the area to establish full-scale mining activities. However, the operation started to decline due to the depletion of diamonds in the desert after World War II, so the miners began to leave one after the other. But what fully broke the camel's back was the discovery of another diamond deposit just a few kilometers southward of Kolmanskop, and today the Jewel City now lies in ruins with many of its houses covered in sand. Number 4. Vallone dei Mulini, Italy. Otherwise known as the Valley of the Mills, Vallone dei Mulini is a site built inside a once active crater made by a massive volcanic eruption around 35,000 years ago. The resulting valley, which is now located in modern-day Sorrento in southern Italy, invited many inhabitants who took advantage of the constant stream of water generated at its bottom to run several mills. By the 1800s, several sawmills plus flour mills that supplied the whole region had been built, hence the name Valley of the Mills. But a place created by a volcano is for no man to reside. After a few years of the early industrial outfits, humidity in the valley became unbearable for the residents who worked at the mills, forcing everyone to leave for a nearby pasta mill that was later established over the valley. Ever since the last resident packed his bags in the late 1940s, the buildings became overwhelmed with aggressive greenery that enjoys a happy life in the valley with a temperature just right at their survival. Number 3. Old Castle Ruins, Sintra. The third spot goes to this little town of Sintra that is located in the foothills of Lisbon, Portugal. The Portuguese fairy tale town is covered in quaint pastoral villas and old Moorish castles. Strolling along the streets has a storybook atmosphere. This town is located by a small body of water that is home to lush forests and overgrown flora, providing a peaceful ambience. In the middle of the towering trees of the forest are ruins of an old castle found along the shore of the lake. Bright green moss sprawls over what's left of the old castle. The entire vicinity has an enchanting aura deep in the middle of the woods. Its picturesque atmosphere also portrays a beautiful, eerie visual, with the fog creeping through the trees. Number 2. Floating Forests, Australia. Next up, in Homebush Bay, Sydney, Australia, the SS Airfield can be found sitting in a shallow water. The rusted hull of the ship floats peacefully, overflowing with gorgeous mangrove trees. The vessel, which was brought to the bay to be dismantled, has gained the title of Floating Forest as a result of its graceful, flourishing flora. A popular tourist attraction, the 107-year-old ship is now protected from demolition by the Historic Shipwrecks Act of 1976. The SS Airfield was a steam collier that traveled between Newcastle and Sydney, but became a supply ship for U.S. troops during World War II. After the war, the vessel was no longer needed and was brought to Homebush Bay for demolition. At the time, the bay was used for shipbreaking. However, shortly after the SS Airfield arrived, the shipbreaking company closed, leaving everything behind. Today, the ship can be seen floating in the bay, giving nature a platform on which to thrive. Number 1. Paraguaxutro, Mexico. At number 1, we have the Church of San Juan Paraguaxutro. This enchanting site is completely surrounded by solid field lava. In 1943, the Parachutin volcano began rising and erupting from a farmer's field. The cone grew 410 meters in a year and continued to spew lava for 8 years after that. The volcano is monogenetic, which means that it will never erupt from the same place again. Thankfully, no one was hurt during the explosions, as the surrounding villages were evacuated quickly. The volcano completely covered 2 villages, leaving only bits and pieces protruding from the thick lava. Miraculously, a church survived the constant attack of molten rock for almost a decade. To this day, it stands tall, although it is completely surrounded by a field of lava. Lava is high in nutrients and helps plants grow quicker, turning the fields surrounding the church into thick, lush gardens. The church is a big tourist attraction, with people coming from all over the world to see the only structure that refused to drown by molten lava. Which of these places would you like to visit the most? Let us know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.